wind carried the tang of salt through the canal-laced city of Bravos, where ships from every corner of the known world crowded the harbor. Beyond the bristling masts and forest of sails lay the imposing facade of the Iron Bank, its black stone walls unyielding against time or threat. The Iron Bank was known to outlast kings, realms, and even legends, for its wealth was a power no single monarch had yet tamed. But Daenerys Targaryen, mother of dragons, had come determined to reshape the world in her image. Her ships were anchored at a respectful distance from the main port, and her Dothraki bloodriders patrolled the decks with wary eyes. Some Bravosi onlookers watched with quiet fascination as a foreign queen of silver-blonde hair arrived among them. Flanked by unsullied guards in polished spears and immaculate discipline, others turned away, considering her presence a mere curiosity, a fresh tale for gossip. But those with the sharpest eyes, spies, informants, and cunning counselors, knew that nothing about this woman's arrival was incidental. She was here to speak with the Iron Bank, and that meant she was here to speak of power. She had spent her life on the run or building her armies, forging alliances in Essos, liberating slaves, earning titles. Now, she stood on the threshold of an institution older than some dynasties, prepared to negotiate for the largest treasury in the known world. At her side stood Tyrion Lannister, wearing a diplomatic expression that hovered between skeptical and intrigue. His eyes held a kind of brightness that only shone when complex calculations spun in his mind. He had been instrumental in convincing Daenerys that gold, steady, immovable wealth, could be just as deadly a weapon as dragons if properly wielded. She had listened to him because she had come to trust his counsel, though her heart was uneasy about negotiating with a bank whose fingers were said to stretch into every kingdom's coffers. Still, she could not deny the allure of the plan. The Iron Bank had propped up the Lannisters, the Baratheons, the Tyrells, whichever house had seemed most likely to return their investment. Their influence was felt across the sea, yet they had never pledged themselves directly to any one monarch unless they saw profit in it. That was the story, at least. Daenerys felt an odd chill coil in her gut as she ascended the broad steps leading to the bronze doors. A hush seemed to fall over the Bravosi crowd. Even the city's ever-present gulls quieted, as if the air had thickened with the weight of possibility. Inside the main hall, the hush grew deeper. The vaulted ceiling soared overhead, painted with faint constellations of gold leaf, shimmering in the lamplight. Pillars of polished obsidian lined the chamber, giving the impression of entering a fortress carved from night itself. Rows of clerks and scribes were hunched over ledgers, their quills scratching softly. But as Daenerys advanced, their eyes lifted, one by one, to observe the woman who thought to treat with the Iron Bank. Her presence was a ripple through calm waters. Tyrion whispered something dry and sardonic at her side, but she didn't catch the words. Her own thoughts were focused on the tall figures at the far end of the hall. Men and women in austere black robes, waiting behind a polished table with poised, inscrutable expressions. When she reached them, a spokesman stepped forward. He was gaunt and elegant, with hooded eyes that conveyed neither warmth nor contempt. He bowed carefully. "Queen Daenerys of House Targaryen," he said in a gentle voice, "breaker of chains, mother of dragons, welcome to the Iron Bank." His words were formal, practiced, and laced with that Bravosi accent that drew out certain vowels. "We have heard much of your exploits. We are pleased you have come to us directly." Daenerys inclined her head. She felt a fierce flutter within her chest, and beneath her calm veneer, she recalled the swirl of power that always accompanied crucial moments in her life. "I thank you for your welcome," she replied. "I have come to speak of Westeros and the forging of a new era, one that could benefit the Iron Bank as much as it benefits me." A whispered hush echoed among the bankers. Tyrion cleared his throat. "We are grateful for the audience," he said, "and we trust that an alliance between the Iron Bank and Her Grace can bring, shall we say, unprecedented returns." The spokesman nodded, drawing out the moment as if tasting the significance of these words. "Indeed, we shall hear you out in private chambers, if that is your wish." And so they were led through corridors decorated with sculptures older than the Targaryen conquest of Westeros, a subdued display of the wealth that lurked in every corner of Bravos' greatest institution. Daenerys felt her confidence grow with every step. She thought of her dragons, safe in their own specially constructed hold outside the city. She thought of her armies, who waited on the ships under strict orders. And she thought of the ultimate goal, the Iron Throne, that blade-forged seat of power in the Red Keep, from which her ancestors had once ruled. Yet now, she wondered, was a throne alone the ultimate goal? Or would she, in time, ascend to heights no Targaryen before her had imagined? They were shown into a discreet meeting room, walled with thick stone to ensure privacy, furnished with a single long table of dark oak. Seated across from them were half a dozen bankers, their eyes gleaming in the lamplight, patient as cats waiting for a bird to flutter in. The spokesman took his seat in the center, folding his hands. "Shall we begin?" he asked. Daenerys settled into her seat, Tyrion at her side, Missandei standing respectfully behind them. "We shall," she said. "I come to you with a proposition. A change in the tides. Westeros stands at a crossroads. Civil war and petty monarchs have left it fractured. My name carries the legacy of dragons, but I also bring a promise of new structure, new order. Yet I recognize that power must have a foundation stronger than mere steel, or even fire. It must have gold." "Mantius." "Oh, Adam?" There was a flicker of interest in the banker's eyes. One of them, with the lined face of a man who had seen decades of deals, leaned forward. "We have always believed gold to be the bedrock of any rule. What do you propose, Your Grace?" Daenerys spread her hands, palms open. "I would offer the Iron Bank a unique opportunity. Invest in my future. In the reconstruction of Westeros under a Targaryen rule that values trade, prosperity, and unwavering repayment of debts. In return, you will not only see those debts paid in full, but see your influence in every major city of Westeros formalized, protected by law, and ensured by the crown. I intend to unite the Seven Kingdoms, and I will rebuild them from the ashes of war. Your gold would not just be a loan, it would be a partnership in forging a stable, profitable realm." Netermanda. Applause settled over the room. Tyrion watched with a carefully neutral expression, though the faint rise of his eyebrow betrayed the tension of the moment. The bankers conferred among themselves in hushed tones. Then the spokesman addressed Daenerys again. "Your ambition is vast," he said. "Though we have seen ambition before, we do not lightly invest in claimants, for the risk can be great." Tyrion seized the moment. "I think you will find Her Grace's record quite persuasive," he said. "She took Astapor, Yunkai, Meereen, freed the oppressed, withstood rebellions, commanded dragons. When she sets her mind to a task, she does not fail. Nor does she squander potential gains. As for risk, well, shall we say that the potential returns are monumental?" The bankers exchanged glances. Then the spokesman said, "And what if we chose not to offer support? What if we instead loaned more gold to the reigning power in King's Landing, whoever that might be, to keep you at bay?" Tyrion's wry grin deepened. "Then you would be investing in a sinking ship. The current monarchy in Westeros is riddled with instability, lacking the popular support to survive. The Lannisters can no longer count on alliances like they once did. War has crippled the crown's coffers. The Tyrells are gone. The Baratheons fractured. The Martells also in disarray. My queen, however, holds the loyalty of thousands and has a plan to end the chaos. Nedwalhin." Daenerys allowed a subtle, commanding edge to enter her voice. "When my ancestors first came to Westeros, the realm was divided. The Targaryens united it under the threat of dragon's fire. But maintaining unity requires more than fear. It requires stability, prosperity. I will deliver both. However, I need the Iron Bank to stand with me. Not behind me, not merely spectating. I want your pledge, your gold, and in turn, I offer you a seat at the table of a reimagined Westeros. No more hidden manipulations. You will be recognized partners in forging a lasting peace." "Nea." The spokesman inclined his head, seemingly impressed by her forthright offer. "We shall need to deliberate. What you ask is not a small matter." Daenerys bowed slightly. "Take the time you need," she said. "But understand that events move swiftly. I will not wait forever." They parted ways with the bankers, promising to contact her soon. When Daenerys and her retinue stepped back onto the marble steps of the bank, a brisk wind greeted them, carrying a sudden swirl of sea spray. Daenerys looked at Tyrion, who let out a slow breath. "That went better than I expected," he mused. "And worse than I hoped." She gave him a knowing half-smile. Her spirits oddly buoyed. "The wheels have begun to turn. We will press on." They crossed the canals in a narrow skiff, the water smooth and dark around them, the Braavosi oarsmen silent. If the city took note of the Targaryen queen drifting through its veins, it did so discreetly. Once they reached her flagship, Daenerys allowed herself a rare moment of relaxation on the deck. Grey Worm approached, saluting her in that crisp manner the Unsullied had perfected. She acknowledged him with a nod. That night, she sat in her private cabin, staring at a map of Westeros spread across a table. Her fingers traced the outlines of the Seven Kingdoms, from the north to Dorne. Once she might have felt only longing or fury. Longing for the home stolen from her, fury at the injustices that had befallen her house. Now, she felt anticipation. If the Iron Bank lent her the might of its gold, she could muster sellswords, build alliances, secure supply lines, and purchase the loyalty of key lords, at least long enough to demonstrate her strength. And of course, she still had dragons. The unmatched power of fire incarnate. The combination was heady. Perhaps that was why she couldn't sleep. She made her rounds on deck, greeted the night watch, and then found Tyrion near the bow, gazing at Braavos' moonlit skyline. He looked lost in thought, swirling a cup of wine. She joined him in silence for a time. The city was a shimmer of lights and quiet shadows. The Titan of Braavos standing guard in the distance, carved in resolute stone. "You're worried they'll say no," Daenerys said softly. He took a careful sip of wine. "I'm worried they'll say yes, but at too high a price. The Iron Bank is the shadow behind every throne. If they decide to back you wholeheartedly, we shall have all the gold we need. But they will expect repayment. In coin, in privileges, in favorable terms. We must be sure not to sell our victory to them. We want an alliance, not subjugation." She considered that. "I will not be beholden to them, Tyrion. But I need their resources. My armies are strong, but Westeros is large. And I cannot afford to wage war on every front. With enough gold, I can buy allegiances before swords are ever crossed." "Then," Tyrion nodded, "the best war is the one you don't have to fight, or so the saying goes. And yet, victory forged in coin can be brittle if not tempered with true loyalty. Still, it might be the only way. You want to reshape the realm, not simply conquer it. For that, you need more than 3 dragons breathing fire from above." She thought of Rhaegal, Viserion, and Drogon, their scales glinting in the Essosi sun. As children of magic and flame, they often evoked awe and terror in equal measure. But a realm built solely on terror was doomed to rebellion. No, she needed gold. She needed the Iron Bank. They lapsed into a companionable hush. The waves lapped gently at the hull, and a sea breeze stirred Daenerys' silver-blonde hair. She closed her eyes, remembering the feeling of wind rushing past her cheeks when she soared on Drogon's back. The sky had felt like hers to command. Now, she had to master a different sky. The intricate currents of finance and diplomacy. Morning brought a missive, sealed with the sigil of the Iron Bank. Summoned once more, Daenerys and her companions made their way back to that vast, silent hall. This time, the air felt charged with finality. The spokesman and his colleagues greeted them with measured politeness. Goblets of wine had been set on the long table, an unexpected courtesy. "The Iron Bank has considered your request," the spokesman began. "We have weighed your recent history, your military strength, and your potential for long-term gains. We have also taken into account the political climate in Westeros." He paused, letting his pale gaze settle on Daenerys. Then Tyrion, "We find your proposal intriguing, Your Grace. We are prepared to invest in your campaign." There was a coil of triumphant tension in Daenerys' chest, but she kept her face impassive. "On what terms?" Another banker produced a parchment from a leather folio. "We shall provide an initial loan of substantial gold, enough to secure the loyalty of several key houses, and to fund the purchase of more ships if needed. In return, upon your successful claiming of the Iron Throne, the Iron Bank will be ensured open trade routes, first rights to certain taxation privileges in port cities, and the exclusive management of the Crown's debts over the next decade. We also require a seat on your small council, or whichever governance structure replaces it, to ensure financial matters remain transparent. The interest rates will be delineated here, but rest assured they are well within reason for an undertaking of this size. Tyrion smirked slightly at the words, well within reason, but he remained silent for the moment. Daenerys leaned forward. A seat on my council? That is not a small demand. The spokesman nodded gracefully. Nor is our gold a small offer. We do not take sides in conflicts lightly. If we do so, we must be certain that our investment is managed with care. A single seat, and we will ensure that your realm flourishes financially. It is in our best interest after all. Thus end. Silence filled the room. Daenerys felt the weight of the decision pressing upon her. A seat on the council could become a lever of undue influence, but rejecting it might cost her the alliance she so desperately needed. She glanced at Tyrion, whose expression advised caution. Yet, she sensed he also understood the necessity of compromise. At length, she exhaled softly. I accept, with the condition that whoever occupies that seat on my council is subject to my oversight. I will not have an agent working against me. Men? A small smile curved the spokesman's lips. We would expect no less. We shall provide an envoy who will serve as an advisor, ensuring the realm's financial stability and the bank's interests. So long as repayment terms are honored and fairness is maintained, you will find no quarrel with us. Daenerys inclined her head. Then, we have an agreement. They finalized the details over the course of hours. She signed in a solemn ceremony with a quill of raven feather, the parchment laid across a polished wooden surface. The bankers sealed the agreement with the traditional Braavosi oath. When it was done, Daenerys felt an unexpected surge of exhilaration. She had, in one sweeping move, acquired more gold than the entirety of Slaver's Bay had offered her, and with it came the subtle, potent power of the Iron Bank's endorsement. News would spread quietly at first, but soon enough the free cities and the noble houses of Westeros would know. The Mother of Dragons had the might of Braavos behind her. That knowledge alone could topple loyalties that might otherwise hold firm. Exiting the Iron Bank that afternoon, Daenerys stood on the steps, letting the Braavosi sun wash over her. Tyrion paced beside her, a half-smile ghosting his lips. Have you ever felt the sting of so many unseen strings pulling on you at once? He asked, sounding both amused and wary. The moment we accepted their terms, we entered a dance as old as coin itself. Daenerys drew a deep breath. I have tamed dragons, Tyrion. I can manage a few bankers. He offered a short bow. Spoken like a true Targaryen. Let us hope that this dance does not lead us astray. For now, we sail to Westeros, with the wind at our backs and gold in our holds. Then Shaq. And so they departed Braavos under the watchful gaze of the Titan, heading toward that land which had never quite left Daenerys' dreams. The crossing was swift by the standards of large fleets. The newly commissioned ships, paid for with the Iron Bank's initial infusion of funds, joined her existing armada. The waters frothed beneath the hulls, and seagulls soared overhead as if heralding the approach of a new force. During the journey, Daenerys found herself in council with Tyrion, Varys, who had rejoined her some time ago, and Grey Worm, mapping out the next steps. We must identify which houses might be the easiest to sway with gold, Tyrion said, tapping the parchment. The ones who have lost much in recent wars, but remain ambivalent toward who rules the Iron Throne. Varys folded his hands into his voluminous sleeves. The Lords of the Reach may be in chaos, but some smaller houses within that fertile region might crave stability over all else. Gold speaks powerfully to a house struggling to recover from the ravages of war, and the Crownlands themselves are not as loyal to King's Landing as you might think. The common folk tire of endless turmoil. If you can show them that your rule will bring them safety and prosperity, many will shift their allegiance. Now see. Daenerys listened, nodding thoughtfully. And what of the North? She asked. The Starks remain a powerful name, even if their numbers are few. Tyrion's brow furrowed. The North remembers, as they say. Memories of betrayal run deep. Buying them outright with gold might not work. They value honor and loyalty differently. Perhaps we approach them last, once we've stabilized the southern kingdoms and proven our legitimacy. Now, she agreed, though part of her wondered if she could forge a friendship with the North by some other means. Perhaps if she offered them autonomy or recognized their needs. But for now, she put that concern aside. First, she needed to secure a foothold in the Crownlands and the Reach. They arrived at Dragonstone, the ancient Targaryen stronghold off the coast of the Blackwater Bay. Storm clouds loomed around its silhouette, the fortress's dark towers rising from the crags like jagged teeth. Setting foot on its shores kindled a sense of destiny in Daenerys' heart. For this was where her lineage had first made landfall centuries ago. She felt the cold wind press against her cheeks as she strode up the winding path toward the castle gates. Her loyal followers fanned out behind her, and she imagined how Aegon the Conqueror must have felt when he set his eyes upon Westeros as a new realm to shape. Inside, the halls were echoing, dust motes drifting through shafts of pale light. Memories of Stannis Baratheon's brief occupation lingered, stray banners in corners, scattered furniture. But to Daenerys, it felt like a place that had been waiting for her, for a Targaryen queen to reclaim it. She wasted no time in instructing her retinue to begin the process of re-establishing the castle's defenses. Gold from the Iron Bank paid for laborers and improvements. Within a fortnight, the fortress bustled with activity. Carpenters, blacksmiths, masons, ships from Braavos arrived with essential supplies. Mercenary companies began to show up, drawn by the promise of coin, though Daenerys made sure to keep them on a short leash. On a brisk dawn, Daenerys climbed to the highest balcony overlooking the courtyard. Below, unsullied trained, their spears thrusting in flawless unison. Dothraki Blood Riders roamed near the stables, dismounting from their horses in search of a new challenge. Smiling faintly, she turned her gaze to the rocky shore where her dragons were free to roam. They had taken to hunting sea creatures in the waters around Dragonstone, returning with fish and sometimes monstrous eels to feast upon. Tyrion joined her on the balcony, scanning the scene. You have an army, you have ships, you have gold. Now, how do you plan to use these gifts? I will not march on King's Landing blindly, Daenerys replied. First, we extend our reach through strategic alliances. We offer relief to small lords ravaged by war. We show them that I bring order, not chaos. With the gold from Braavos, we can rebuild their lands, give them seeds for their fields, guarantee them trade agreements. She turned to Tyrion, her eyes glinting. They will know me not only as a conqueror, but as a benefactor. Tyrion stroked his chin. It's a wise approach, though it requires patience. Still, if we can sway enough bannermen in the Crown lands, King's Landing will be isolated. Then, when we finally move on the capital, the city may open its gates rather than fight a hopeless war. She nodded. I want as little bloodshed as possible. The great houses have bled Westeros dry. I will not be another tyrant. My father's name casts a long shadow. I must prove I am not the Mad King reborn. Mati. So the plan unfurled. Daenerys dispatched envoys, each bearing chests of gold and letters proclaiming her intentions. She invited those minor lords, who had suffered the worst from the Crown's neglect, to come to Dragonstone to meet with her advisors. Meanwhile, Tyrion, Missandei, and Varys coordinated behind the scenes, identifying which lords were most likely to respond to the promise of financial assistance, and which might prefer intimidation. The Iron Bank's gold became a tool of persuasion, offered with an open hand rather than forcibly seized. Some lords came warily, fear in their eyes. They brought retinues of loyal knights, uncertain whether this Targaryen queen could be trusted. To their surprise, they found Daenerys Targaryen welcoming them in the castle's great hall, her dragons occasionally visible through the large windows, soaring across a stormy sky. Over small feasts prepared by the best cooks Tyrion could employ, they spoke of the hardships their lands faced. Hungry small folk, burnt fields, collapsed mines, bandit raids. One by one, Daenerys listened, her expression solemn, and offered them solutions. gold to rebuild, the protection of her unsullied against bandits, aid in re-establishing trade routes to the free cities. Such gifts were impossible to ignore. Some were hesitant. "My people have heard tales of dragonfire," one old lord stammered, glancing out the window at Drogon's passing silhouette. "They say your father burned men alive. Why should we trust you?" Daenerys met his gaze firmly. "Because I burn only those who prove themselves my enemies and offer harm to the innocent. I am not my father. I have freed slaves, not taken them. I have fought tyrants, not cowered behind them. You have my word. If you join me in rebuilding Westeros, you and your people will flourish. Defy me, and yes, you risk my wrath. But that is no different than any other ruler you have known. The difference is that I do not seek power only for power's sake. I want a realm that thrives." Then, the old lord swallowed, glancing around at the opulence of Dragonstone under Daenerys' new administration. He left, still uncertain, but the seeds of doubt regarding the current regime in King's Landing had been planted. Others proved more easily swayed, dazzled by the sudden prospect of restoring their fortunes. Quietly, Daenerys' influence seeped through the Crown lands. Her envoys returned with word that smaller houses were pledging her their loyalty, or at least offering neutrality in the coming conflict. Behind the scenes, the Iron Bank's envoy arrived as promised, a Braavosi gentleman named Torrhen, dressed in dark silks, carrying himself with the composure of a man used to measured outcomes. He took a seat at her newly formed council, politely asking questions about each expenditure. He was neither meddlesome nor obsequious. Rather, he was a silent sentinel of the bank's interests. Whenever significant sums of gold were allocated to a particular lord or cause, he would incline his head, make a careful note, and only occasionally offer a mild suggestion. It was late one evening when Daenerys found herself alone with Torrhen in the council chamber, poring over a ledger detailing sums promised to various lords. A single candle lit the table, casting flickering shadows. "You have allocated a considerable amount toward the granaries in House Irondale's domain," Torrhen noted, his quill scratching the parchment. "Surely their lands are not as strategic as others." Daenerys glanced up, studying his impassive face. "They are small, yes, but their fields could feed the entire region if restored. Investing in them means I care for the small folk. With full bellies, they are less likely to resent me, more likely to see me as a protector rather than an invader. That is strategic in its own right." "Now," Torrhen nodded, as though weighing the logic in his precise scales. "Sound reasoning, Your Grace. The bank appreciates wise investments. Still, you must be cautious. Too much generosity too soon, and you may find yourself in great debt, even to us." She felt a flicker of determination. "The gold is my weapon now, Torrhen. I must use it effectively. My dragons can only conquer so much, but coin can forge alliances that no dragonfire can ensure." "No. Wise indeed," he murmured. There was something in his tone that made her wonder what the Iron Bank's deeper intentions might be, but she brushed aside the concern. For now, their goals aligned. As the weeks passed, news traveled across Westeros. Whispers rose that the Targaryen queen in Dragonstone was not simply amassing armies, but also offering succor to lands ravaged by war. Merchants began to speak of new trading opportunities. Sellsword companies arrived, hoping to be hired, and some were. Yet Daenerys was careful not to rely wholly on sellswords. Her core fighting force remained the Unsullied and the Dothraki, bound by loyalty and fierce devotion. Amid these developments, King's Landing stirred uneasily. The occupant of the throne, whoever claimed that seat in the aftermath of recent upheavals, doubtless recognized the growing threat. Spies and ravens would have reported the swirl of activity around Dragonstone, the revival of small lords who had once knelt to the Iron Throne. But there was no immediate march on the capital. Daenerys bided her time, employing gold and diplomacy as skillfully as she might employ fire and blood. And in that slow burn of strategy, a new power dynamic emerged. Men who had once sworn fealty to the Lannisters or the remnants of the Baratheon line found themselves comparing the cold arrogance of King's Landing to the benevolent, if stern presence of Daenerys Targaryen. With each pledge of fealty, each chest of gold spent, each field restored, She furthered the notion that she was not a mad conqueror, but a rightful queen investing in her people's future. Though some lords doubted, some resisted, even more quietly hedged their bets, shifting alliances in a pattern that had repeated itself countless times in Westerosi history. Tyrion orchestrated letters, forging subtle deals. Varys slipped coded messages, encouraging certain discontented individuals within the crown's own ranks to consider the Targaryen alternative. And Daenerys, with the serenity of a queen who had walked through fire and emerged unburnt, presided over it all, forging a new tapestry of loyalty. Yet beneath the surface, a tension simmered. She could sense it in herself, as well as in those around her. She was a dragon after all, and dragons were not known for patience. Each day she kept her armies idle. Each day she withheld her dragons from scouring the land, demanded discipline. Some of her Dothraki riders grew restless, longing to gallop into battle. Even Grey Worm, and the unsullied disciplined though they were, seemed prepared for a conflict that had yet to erupt. But Daenerys held them back, reminding them that every day of preparation, every day spent turning Westeros' hearts and minds, was another stone laid in the foundation of her inevitable triumph. When the day finally came that a bolder house decided to declare for her openly, it was House Rosby, minor, but strategically near King's Landing. The new Lord Rosby, a youth who had inherited after a series of tragic losses, publicly proclaimed that his lands would shelter no armies loyal to the usurpers in the capital. In his declaration, he stated that Daenerys Targaryen had proven a better caretaker of the realm's future than the so-called kings that had bled Westeros in recent years. The announcement sent a shockwave through the Crown lands. Daenerys supporters celebrated quietly. Tyrion permitted himself a small glass of Dornish wine. Varys inclined his head and whispered, "The cracks in King's Landing's power have begun to show." For her part, Daenerys received Lord Rosby's oath of fealty in the Dragonstone throne room, a high seat carved of ancient volcanic stone, set under flickering torches. Draped in Targaryen black and red, she accepted his bow with regal composure, while her dragons growled softly in the courtyard beyond. In that moment, she realized that her plan was working. The realm could indeed be purchased with gold, but gold backed by legitimacy, empathy, and the promise of unwavering power. In essence, she was no mere sellsword. She was a queen, and the Iron Bank's gold was her key to unlocking the realm's heart before ever setting foot in the Red Keep. Yet, she was not naive. She knew that sooner or later the swords would have to come out of their scabbards. War had a way of finding those who sought the throne, especially a throne as coveted as the Iron Throne of Westeros. But if she had learned anything from the mistakes of those who came before, it was that a queen should choose her battles with care. She would not let herself be drawn into a Pyrrhic victory, one that cost too many lives and left her with a hollow crown. Instead, she would wage a war of gold and fire, using each to reinforce the other. By the time she reached the gates of King's Landing, perhaps its people would greet her, not as a dragon of destruction, but as the dawn of a brighter era. Still, in the quiet hours when she paced the halls of Dragonstone, she felt the old fire within her, the burning ambition that had carried her across the seas. She remembered slavers trembling at her approach, cities liberated under the shadow of dragons' wings. Sometimes, her dreams were filled with flames, of armies fleeing before Drogon's roar. She would awaken, her heart pounding, her mind caught between exultation and dread. Power was intoxicating, and she had to ensure she remained its master, not its servant. The ocean wind howled around the castle spires, a constant reminder of the forces of nature that had shaped the Targaryen heritage. On one such night, she stood on a rampart overlooking the sea. The moonlight shimmered on the waves, and in the distance, she saw the silhouettes of her dragons, dark shapes against the stars. She whispered to them in Valyrian, a silent vow that soon they would cross the narrow sea not as wanderers, but as conquerors. And in the recesses of her mind, she imagined what the Seven Kingdoms might look like under her rule. Schools built in the poorest regions, roads repaired, trade flourishing, people bending the knee not just out of fear, but respect. She would bring justice where too many had known only the corruption of those who sat on the Iron Throne. But she could not deny that a spark of impatience glowed in her core. How long before she tested the iron of her foes in battle? How long before she heard the roar of her armies accompanied by the cheers of liberated crowds? Tyrion, for his part, continued to temper her impatience with measured caution. Day by day, he orchestrated a symphony of deals and letters, ensuring that the gold from Braavos made its way to the right pockets, the right hearts. "We are weaving a net," he told her once, leaning over the map in the council chamber. "When the time comes, and we tighten the strands, King's Landing will find itself isolated, with nowhere to turn." The image comforted and excited her in equal measure. The memory of how she had taken Meereen with minimal bloodshed came to mind. Could it be done again, on a grander scale? If so, she would further cement her image as a queen who did not need wanton violence. But she also remembered the lessons learned in Meereen. Rebellions came swiftly when old powers felt threatened. She must guard her flanks. Her watchers on the mainland reported that envoys from King's Landing scurried from one house to another, trying to secure resources for a counteroffensive. But the coffers of the crown were nearly empty, the realms too war-weary. Some houses declared neutrality, biding their time. Others openly declared for Daenerys. And with each day, more and more looked upon the Targaryen banner with new interest, because gold promised safety, promised a new beginning. That was how Daenerys Targaryen found herself fighting a different kind of war, one of letters and gifts, of promises sealed with signet rings, of feasts and carefully orchestrated appearances. Her dragons, for now, remained a looming threat more than an unleashed fury. She would let King's Landing tremble at the stories, keep them guessing about her next move. And all the while, her counselors worked late into the night, poring over lists of houses, ledgers of coin, rosters of sellsword companies. The Iron Bank's envoy observed it all, quiet yet attentive, ensuring that every coin spent would ultimately return with interest. Daenerys understood that eventually she must repay the debt, but if she succeeded, Westeros itself would become her treasury. Her dragons would be unstoppable, not just as beasts of war, but as symbols of a queen who knew how to wield every tool at her disposal. So the days lengthened into weeks, and the weeks threatened to become months, as the final confrontation with the capital remained on the horizon, like a summer storm gathering force. In the hearts of her soldiers, anticipation simmered. In the minds of her newly pledged lords, hope mingled with uncertainty. Yet in the core of Daenerys Targaryen, she felt a growing assurance. She was no longer the exiled princess scrambling to survive. She was a queen with gold enough to shape destiny, with an army tempered by loyalty, and 3 dragons that could turn stone walls to ash if she so commanded. She thought often of the Iron Throne, picturing its twisted swords under the dim glow of the throne room's lanterns. She did not fear that seat. She meant to claim it. But now, she saw beyond its cold iron edges, a realm that needed rebuilding, not just ruling. And if she had to buy that realm's future with the Iron Bank's gold, then so be it. Let the bankers have their interest. Let them have their seat at her table. In time, she would ensure Westeros was strong enough to stand without their crutch. But first, there would be a reckoning. The crown would not yield easily. The city that had once toppled her ancestors would test her mettle as well. For Daenerys Targaryen, the question was no longer if she would sit the Iron Throne, but how. How to do so in a way that brought unity, not endless rebellion. How to burn away the corruption without burning the realm to cinders. And how to balance the contradictory powers of gold and fire, ensuring that neither consumed her before she could remake Westeros in her own image. That night, she stood once more upon the walls of Dragonstone, her gaze fixed on the horizon where King's Landing lay. Clouds shifted across the moon, and a salt-laden wind gusted around her. She envisioned the spires of the Red Keep, the crowds filling the streets, the shimmer of the Blackwater rush. She wondered what the people there would think when word came that the Targaryen queen had not simply landed with dragons, but had also bought the realm from beneath the throne. Fierce, almost feral pride coursed through her. She was Daenerys Stormborn, the unburnt breaker of chains, mother of dragons, and now, for the first time in centuries, The Targaryen who would show Westeros that gold could be as fearsome a weapon as fire, especially when wielded by a dragon. A smile touched her lips, and in the distance, Drogon roared into the night sky, his echoing cry carrying across the dark waves. Yes, let the realm know. Daenerys Targaryen was coming, and she would have her due, bought with every coin and every spark of dragon fire she possessed. In the days ahead, she would walk a delicate path, balancing the demands of her new allies, soothing the fears of the people, and bracing for whatever cunning moves her enemies would devise. But she had gained that most precious commodity of all, time. Time to build, to plan, to strengthen her grip on the throne she claimed by birth. In the quiet hush that followed Drogon's roar, she closed her eyes. She remembered the wide deserts of Essos, the scorching sun in the sky above her, as she first emerged from the flames with newborn dragons clinging to her shoulders. That had been the start of a journey guided by destiny. Now, destiny beckoned once more, carrying her across the sea to a land once ruled by her forebears. This was not just conquest, it was homecoming. She breathed in the salt air, heart steady and determined. Tomorrow, she would meet with more lords, sign more ledgers, and dispatch more envoys. She would study Tyrion's list of prospective allies, weigh Varys' intelligence on the movements in King's Landing, and continue to cement her position. Every coin spent would be an investment in the realm's future. Her future. And when the final tally was made, the Iron Bank would have no regrets. For Daenerys Targaryen intended to repay every debt with interest. Such was the cost of reshaping a kingdom, and she would not shrink from it. Thus the wheel turned, as it always did, yet under her hand, that wheel might be shattered or remade. She would forge a new Westeros, step by careful step, until the day came when gold and fire converged upon the gates of King's Landing, and the throne of 1,000 swords answered to the queen who had purchased the realm's loyalty before unleashing the fury of dragons. And in that convergence, Daenerys Targaryen would not merely sit the Iron Throne. She would transform it, heralding the dawn of an era the 7 kingdoms would remember for generations to come. A cold wind swept across the courtyard of Dragonstone, carrying with it the faint cries of distant seabirds. Under the pale morning light, Daenerys stood near the great basalt walls, her gaze fixed on the shifting horizon. Ships came and went in a steady flow now, arriving from Braavos and Volantis, even from Pentos and Lys. Some carried supplies purchased with the Iron Bank's gold. Others brought messengers wrapped in cloaks, each bearing tidings of new alliances or uneasy letters from lords testing the waters of her power. Over the last few moons, Dragonstone had grown busy, its harbor bristling with masts, its once quiet corridors echoing with voices from across the narrow sea. She felt a stirring in her blood, that old mixture of anticipation and restless energy. Though her forces were stronger each day, though more of the Crownland's lesser houses leaned cautiously in her direction, she sensed the hour of true reckoning still lingered beyond the horizon. In the meantime, she paced the battlements, her mind dancing between strategy and memory. Sometimes she recalled the swirl of desert sands in Essos, the moment she had stood among the ashes of her husband's funeral pyre and witnessed dragons born into the world. Those days felt distant, and yet they had shaped her into who she was, a queen unafraid to seize her destiny however daunting the cost. Behind her, the measured tread of boots announced Grey Worm's approach. He came to her side, silent for a moment, following her gaze out to the sea. The sky was clouded, streaked with watery sunlight. "Your Grace," he said softly, dipping his head in greeting. "All is well among the Unsullied. The men grow accustomed to this place, though many prefer the open fields for training." She acknowledged him with a nod. "They will have the open fields soon enough." Her voice was calm, but tinged with determination. "Have our envoys returned from the mainland?" "2 have returned with new pledges," Grey Worm replied. "Houses barely worth naming in old songs, but lords who carry pockets of farmland and small keeps. They are eager for your protection, and your gold. One more envoy remains on the road, expected within 3 days." Daenerys exhaled. "Good. Even the smallest house can sway its neighbors if treated with respect. She cast him a glance. And the Dothraki? How do they fare? His expression darkened slightly. They grow restless. Your riders say they have not tasted true battle since arriving on these shores. Some test their courage by hunting in the hills, or challenging each other to raids on unclaimed fields. We keep them in check, but they hunger for war. She offered him a faint, wry smile. They'll have their battles in time. For now, ensure they respect the small folk. We can't win hearts by letting the Dothraki terrorize anyone who crosses their path. Napender. Grey Worm pressed a fist to his heart. It will be done, Your Grace. When he departed, Daenerys lingered on the ramparts, allowing the chill air to brush her cheeks. In the distance, she spotted Drogon circling above a jagged rock formation near the shore. Wings spread in a slow, graceful arc. Rhaegal and Viserion soared in lazy formation behind him, weaving patterns against the cloudy sky. They seemed content to search the coastline for seals or seabirds, a far cry from the fire and blood of conquest. Sometimes she wondered if the dragons felt the same restless tug as the Dothraki, or if they sensed her restraint, waiting for the moment when she would unleash them in earnest. That afternoon, she met with Tyrion and Missandei in a small council chamber that overlooked the churning waves below. Torrhen, the Braavosi envoy from the Iron Bank, was already seated at the long table, his hands folded upon his polished ledger. Lamps lit the room with a warm glow, chasing away the day's gloom. On the table lay maps of the Crown Lands and the Reach, detailing the tapestry of alliances, dotted lines for uncertain loyalties, solid lines for declared houses, and blank spaces where news remained uncertain. Tyrion guided them through the latest developments, his finger tracing along the coastline. House Bywater has quietly signaled willingness to shift allegiance if we can guarantee them favorable trade rights with Braavos. Their lands border Rosby's, which, as we know, openly declared for you, Your Grace. That could create a small but significant block of loyal bannermen near the Blackwater. There's also talk of House Massey reconsidering its loyalty. Their coffers are thin after years of skirmishes, and a well-timed infusion of gold could tip their scales. Daenerys studied the map. So we have Rosby, Bywater, and Massey forming a cluster of influence. She glanced at Missandei. Have we offered them the same terms we offered the others? Missandei nodded, her measured tone precise. Yes, Your Grace. Resources to rebuild, a promise of protection, and the prospect of future prosperity under Targaryen rule. We emphasize your willingness to consult local lords about governance in their lands, rather than imposing a heavy hand from King's Landing. The response has been mostly favorable. Torrhen cleared his throat, his Braavosi accent light yet distinct. These promises require gold, naturally. The Iron Bank is prepared to release the next portion of the loan. We simply require the usual assurances that the distribution will proceed as planned. Daenerys regarded him steadily. You have my word that every coin spent goes toward strengthening the realm I intend to rule. When I am queen, trade will flourish, taxes will be fair but collected, and the Iron Bank will be repaid with the agreed interest. The envoy inclined his head, seeming satisfied enough. He made a careful note in his ledger. We appreciate the consistency, Your Grace. Tyrion smiled faintly. Consistency is a rare commodity in this land. All the more reason our prospective allies might trust Her Grace over the chaos in King's Landing. Daenerys turned to him, her brows knitting. We've heard little from the Red Keep itself in recent days. What do your sources say? His face grew more somber. The Crown's coffers are thin. Their efforts to rally the Lords Paramount have faced many difficulties. Some houses still back them out of tradition or fear, but the unstoppable tide of gold we bring is persuasive. There is word of King's Landing hiring sellswords, but thus far, it seems they can barely afford to bolster the City Watch. Morale there is low. Missandei laid a roll of parchment on the table. We have also received intelligence that the capital is rife with rumors. Peasants whispering that a Targaryen queen bides her time in Dragonstone, offering mercy and prosperity instead of devastation. The city does not yet quake in fear. Rather, there is Curiosity. Some say they would welcome a change if it meant a surcease from endless conflict. Daenerys felt a stir of gratification. Let them wonder. When the time is right, we will approach them more directly. Her gaze swept over her council. For now, we keep to our plan. Strengthen alliances, gather resources, and ensure the Crownlands remember that there is another path. When next we meet, we will review the final stages before marching on King's Landing. Then they dispersed to attend their tasks. Daenerys lingered a moment with Missandei. Stepping aside from the table, she touched her friend's shoulder gently. You have worked tirelessly, my dear friend. Ensure you take some rest. I've barely seen you pause these last weeks. Missandei's face softened in a smile. I will, Your Grace. But this work is fulfilling. We fight with words instead of swords for now, and it feels less bloody. Mr. Point. Daenerys took her hand. Yes, it does. May it remain as bloodless as possible for as long as we can manage. In the days that followed, Daenerys sent out new envoys to woo House Bywater and House Massey. She wrote her own letters, sealing each with the three-headed dragon crest and a flourish of her name. She made it clear that while she expected loyalty, she would reward that loyalty with security and prosperity. As these couriers departed, the waves of the narrow sea bore them swiftly toward the mainland, guided by favorable winds. Tyrion remained busy in the castle's library, sorting through genealogies and trade records, searching for every possible angle to entice or intimidate key families. Varys, as if returned to his old network of whispers, dispatched birds with coded messages. Meanwhile, the Dothraki roamed the beaches, taking short raids into unclaimed patches of land, returning with game. Grey Worm ensured discipline, punishing any who dared violate Daenerys' edict against harming local smallfolk. Tensions simmered, but stayed contained. Late one evening, Daenerys sat in the glow of a single lantern in her private solar, reading a report Missandei had compiled on the latest negotiations. The words blurred before her eyes. Weariness nipped at her thoughts, and she pressed the heels of her hands into her eyelids, fighting back the urge to collapse into sleep. Often, she found her mind spinning with the complexities of finance and deals, longing for simpler times when she only had to ignite her enemies' strongholds with dragonfire. But she knew that forging a lasting peace demanded this painstaking labor. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. It was Jorah Mormont, who had quietly rejoined her retinue months before. Having recovered from his trials in the fighting pits and subsequent journeys, he bowed with the old deference that sometimes made her ache for how much he had suffered on her behalf. Your Grace, he said quietly, I've just returned from an errand at your request, delivering letters to certain knights in the Crownlands. All went smoothly, though I sense weariness in the air. She gestured for him to enter, setting aside the parchment. Thank you, Sir Jorah. Your loyalty has been invaluable to me, as always. He hesitated, then stepped closer, glancing at the map stretched over a low table. Colored pins indicated which lords had declared for her, which remained undecided, and which still opposed her. It gladdens my heart to see the realm's confidence shifting in your favor, he said softly. I cannot help but remember the day we first met in the Red Waste. How far we both have come. Daenerys followed his gaze to the pins. Yes, we have traveled a long road, and we have much further to go. Sometimes I yearn to Mount Drogon and take King's Landing in a single blaze. But Tyrion insists, and I agree, that to rule after I've taken the throne, I must lay this foundation, or else I will be just another conqueror. A flicker of sympathy crossed Jorah's face. Your approach will earn you the realm's gratitude in the end. Better to be seen as a savior than a tyrant. Still, your people, myself included, stand ready to fight if that day comes. Mentrell. She reached out, briefly touching his arm. Thank you, Jorah. Soon enough we may indeed call upon our strength. For now, rest. We all must keep our wits about us. That night, she slept fitfully, haunted by dreams of blazing battlefields and cheers from crowds she couldn't see. She awoke before dawn, the sound of waves crashing against Dragonstow's shores echoing in the pre-dawn gloom. Rising, she made her way through the corridors, a cloak draped over her nightdress for warmth. She ascended the steps to the platform where her dragons often roosted. Outside, the wind snatched at her cloak, and she hugged it tighter. The sky to the east showed the earliest hints of sunrise, pale purple washing into a faint orange glow. Droplets of mist clung to the stone underfoot. Drogon sensed her presence and stirred, lifting his massive head. His black scales shimmered like polished onyx, and his eyes glowed in the half-light. Rhaegal and Viserion lay curled nearby, their tails twitching as they dreamed draconic dreams. She moved closer to Drogon, placing a hand on the warm scales of his flank. His breath rumbled through him, and she felt it vibrate in her bones. A wave of primal awe flooded her, as it always did. She had hatched them, nurtured them, and now they had grown into lethal wonders that could reshape the world in a single pass of flame. But she fought down the urge to harness that terrible power immediately. When the time came, all of Westeros would know the fury of dragons. Until then, she would let her gold speak. In the soft hush before dawn, a new resolve formed within her. She would not be rushed, nor would she let doubt gnaw at her plan. She would show the Seven Kingdoms another way. A queen who won loyalty, not through slaughter, but through the promise of rebirth and renewal. And when she finally loomed before the walls of King's Landing, no one could claim they hadn't seen it coming. Later that morning, the castle awoke to find Daenerys already in council with Tyrion, Varys, Missandei, Torrhen, and a handful of other trusted advisors. She paced as they discussed news from the roads leading toward King's Landing. Merchants who traveled under banners of neutrality had reported an uptick in banditry, desperate men and women turning to robbery in the lawless fringes. It was a reminder that the realm still suffered, that a queen's duty lay not only in capturing a throne, but in restoring order. Tyrion's finger tapped a small parchment listing recent raids. I fear that if we don't address this soon, these isolated incidents could become a plague on trade routes. Potential allies may blame us for failing to keep order, especially those who haven't fully declared but are leaning our way. No. Daenerys glanced at Grey Worm. Then let us send a detachment of Unsullied to secure the roads. Make it known that anyone attacking innocent travelers will face swift justice. We can no longer allow chaos to spread. Grey Worm inclined his head. I will see it done. Torrhen shifted in his seat, interjecting mildly. The Iron Bank has a vested interest in maintaining safe roads for trade. We are pleased to see such a swift decision, Your Grace. If I may suggest, consider hiring a small escort of local sellswords to accompany the Unsullied. Sometimes seeing familiar Westerosi faces in a caravan can put local lords at ease and discourage ambitious bandits who might think foreign guards are easily outmaneuvered. Daenerys considered, then nodded. Very well. Tyrion arranged the hire of a reputable band, nothing too large, enough to complement the Unsullied presence without overshadowing it. He scribbled a note. I'll see you at. As the meeting continued, they delved into the details of shipping routes, the next wave of gold allocations, and the possibility of constructing makeshift supply stations along the coast to aid any new lords who had joined her cause. Daenerys listened intently, committing each plan to memory. She wanted to ensure no coin was wasted. Every piece of the puzzle must fit into the grand design of a stable realm. When midday arrived, they paused to take a light meal in the castle's solar. The atmosphere was subdued, though Missandei's gentle humor brightened it slightly. Tyrion and Varys exchanged pointed remarks about the many lords who seemed to shift allegiances with the breeze, eliciting a low chuckle from Daenerys. Even Torrhen allowed a small smile to curve his lips, though he quickly returned to his reserved demeanor. Once the meal concluded, Daenerys excused herself to walk among the soldiers, wanting to see firsthand how her commands were implemented. She descended into the main courtyard, where lines of Unsullied were preparing to embark for the roads leading to King's Landing. The ring of steel and the bark of orders reverberated against the castle walls. She watched as Grey Worm inspected the ranks, checking each soldier's gear with meticulous precision. Standing to one side, a group of newly hired Westerosi sellswords lingered, eyeing the Unsullied with a mixture of awe and skepticism. Their captain, a scarred man in patched leather armor, approached Daenerys gingerly. "Your Grace," he said, bowing with a flourish that might have been mocking if not for the underlying tension in his voice. "We stand ready to serve. Word is we'll be securing the roads from bandits." Daenerys regarded him coolly. "Indeed. You are to take your orders from Grey Worm. Any act of pillage or cruelty toward local inhabitants will be punished harshly. Are we clear?" He swallowed, nodding. "Clear, my queen." Her gaze flicked over his men, who looked hardy enough. Veterans of too many wars, no doubt. "Serve well, and you will be paid well. Fail in your duty, and you will find no place in my service." He bowed again. "Understood." She left them to their preparations, turning her steps toward the stables where the Dothraki riders tended their horses. The pungent smell of hay and manure filled the air. Many of the riders were brushing down their mounts or checking harnesses. One of the bloodriders, Kuto's younger brother Ralko, caught sight of her and offered a quick bow of respect. "You command, we ride," he said simply, eyes flashing with eagerness. Daenerys allowed herself a small smile. "Not yet, Ralko. Soon, perhaps. For now, remain prepared. If rumors of unrest among certain lords prove true, we may need your riders to demonstrate Targaryen strength." "They didn't hear." Ralko's grin widened. "Blood of my blood, we wait only for your word." That fervent devotion the Dothraki held for her still warmed her heart, reminding her of the countless roads traveled and battles won. She clasped his arm. "Thank you for your patience." He inclined his head, and she left him to his tasks, returning to the castle's main hall. Along the way, she encountered Ser Jorah emerging from a side corridor. He offered her a respectful nod. "Your Grace, might I speak with you?" She gestured for him to walk alongside her. "Of course." He followed her toward an alcove overlooking a courtyard fountain. The water trickled softly, providing a gentle counterpoint to the clamor of armed men beyond. Jorah paused, considering his words. "I know you aim to claim the throne without reducing the city to ashes," he began. "And your methods so far are admirable. But I've heard whispers from certain lords that the capital is testing new defenses. Ziga weapons, archers drilling daily on the walls. They may not have gold to spare, but they have enough cunning to prepare." "Not a nickel." Daenerys looked at him, unflinching. "Let them prepare. My plan has never been to storm the city without first weakening it from within. Perhaps we will starve them out, or perhaps the people will rise in support of me once they see the alternative. My father tried to burn King's Landing when he felt cornered. I will not repeat that tragedy." He nodded, relief mingling with concern. "Just be mindful. Desperate rulers might do desperate things. If word reaches them that more houses flock to your banner, they may strike first." "Not certainly." She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the horrors she had witnessed in Essos, the cruelty of those who sensed their grip on power slipping. "I am mindful, Jorah. That is why we must continue carefully, yet swiftly enough to keep them off balance. Thank you for bringing this to me." He inclined his head, stepping back as she moved on. That evening, after the garrison of Unsullied and Sellswords had departed to secure the roads, Daenerys found herself momentarily alone in the castle's grand library. The chamber was filled with dusty tomes, old scrolls detailing the histories of Targaryen rule. She selected one volume at random, an ancient text that chronicled the earliest years after Aegon's conquest, how houses had been coaxed or coerced into submission. Sitting at a stone bench beneath a flickering lantern, she thumbed through the yellowed pages. The accounts described harsh negotiations, forced marriages, bloody duels. It seemed that the forging of the Seven Kingdoms had been anything but a gentle process. Her gaze fell upon a worn passage. Aegon realized that not every war need be fought with fire. Some battles are best won with promises of peace. She traced the words, wondering how many in her lineage had truly understood that. The Targaryens had soared across the skies on dragons, made kings kneel, and built a dynasty that lasted for generations. Yet had they ever sought to truly reform the realm they claimed to rule? She felt an odd kinship with those ancient forebears. but she also recognized her path must diverge from theirs in crucial ways. If she ever wanted to break the cycle of bloodshed, she needed to learn from both their successes and failures. Midway through her reading, Tyrion found her in the library, clearing his throat softly so as not to startle her. She closed the old tome, offering him a questioning glance. He carried a small stack of letters under his arm. "More responses from the houses we've courted," he explained. "Some are favorable, some more cautious. I wanted to go over them with you if you have a moment." She set aside the text and beckoned him closer. They spread the letters across a nearby table. By the light of a single lantern, they pored over each scrap of parchment, each seal revealing the crest of a house deciding its future. Tyrion read aloud summaries of their positions. House Massey demanded certain concessions. Lower taxes for 3 years, guaranteed seats for their heirs in any future courtly councils. House Bywater requested assistance repairing their keep's walls, damaged in some obscure skirmish a year prior. A small group of knights from the Stormlands expressed interest in defecting, provided Daenerys recognized their traditional rights on local trade routes. Daenerys listened carefully, giving instructions for each negotiation. Sometimes she acquiesced, other times she insisted on conditions of her own. Tyrion transcribed her decisions. Through it all, she felt the weight of shaping a new order, her word slowly becoming the currency of the realm's future. When they were nearly finished, Tyrion paused, tapping a finger on a final folded note. "This one is interesting," he said. "It comes from Lord Merryweather's steward, not from the Lord himself. It suggests that if we provide a strong enough show of force near their borders, they might be compelled to pledge loyalty. A sort of push me into your arms approach." "Into Usher?" She frowned. "They want plausible deniability." "Precisely. They'd like to claim they had no choice. Fear of your dragons and so forth. That way, if events somehow turn against us, they can say they were coerced." A small flare of anger rose in her, typical of lords who value their own security above all else. Tyrion nodded. "Yes, but we might accommodate them if it leads to a bloodless shift. Merryweather land is sizable, well-positioned, and would give us a strong foothold." "Then sure," Daenerys considered, tapping a finger on the edge of the table. "I dislike rewarding such cowardice, but I see the strategic value. Arrange a demonstration of our presence near their borders. No real attack, just enough to rattle them. Let them kneel with their pride intact. But make it known that once they bend the knee, there is no going back." He scribbled a note. "Understood. I'll see that Grey Worm coordinates with them quietly." Menren. They concluded their discussion, and Tyrion looked at her with a mixture of respect and caution. These lords, they dance a complicated minuet of fear and greed. You've managed to navigate it surprisingly well. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a more direct approach? She gave him a tired smile. "I have dragons and armies enough to burn my enemies. But if I do so indiscriminately, what will remain to rule? Let them play their games. When I sit on the Iron Throne, they will realize I was not blind to their duplicities." "Best dame." Tyrion bowed his head. "Well said, Your Grace." She rose from the table, her legs stiff from hours of sitting. Together, they left the library and walked through corridors lit by guttering torches, discussing final details. By the time they parted ways, Tyrion to send new letters, Daenerys to find a moment of repose. The castle slept, and only the sentries remained awake, patrolling the ramparts under a starless sky. Yet rest did not come easily. Her mind churned with endless possibilities, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. Eventually, she drifted into a fitful slumber, dreaming of a massive banquet hall, packed with lords and ladies, each wearing 2 masks, one that smiled and one that grimaced. As she rose to address them, the masks multiplied, swirling in a dizzying dance of alliances and betrayals. In the distance, she heard Drogon's roar, but she could not see him. The dream left her unsettled. When dawn broke, she roused herself to discover fresh news awaiting her. The detachment of Unsullied and Sellswords had encountered a band of highway robbers near an important crossroads. The clash had been swift and decisive, with the robbers scattered or slain. Local villagers were already singing praises of the Silver Queen's men, who had delivered them from constant raids. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Daenerys instructed Grey Worm to see that the villagers were further aided. Food, clothing, whatever they might need. Over the next few days, more such skirmishes occurred. Each time, her forces emerged triumphant, capturing or killing lawless brigands who preyed on helpless travelers. With each success, her name spread among the common folk. Merchants began flying small banners of the three-headed dragon on their wagons, hoping for safe passage. Gradually, the main roads around the Crownlands settled into a wary calm, policed by her soldiers. Some lords objected, claiming she was overstepping the authority of the Iron Throne, but others saw the benefits of stability and either remained neutral or quietly approved. Meanwhile, the Dothraki continued to chafe under inaction. Rumors circulated among them that Daenerys was losing her fire, becoming too much of a Westerosi queen, forgetting the raw thrill of open combat. She knew she had to address these doubts before they festered. One crisp morning, she summoned her blood riders and key Dothraki chiefs to a stone courtyard near Dragonstone's eastern wall. There, in the gray light, she stood before them with Drogon perched on a nearby parapet, a hulking sentinel of black wings. The Dothraki warriors bowed, but did not hide their impatience. Ralco spoke first, a feverish gleam in his eyes. "Blood of my we are your Khalasar. We rode across the poison water for you. We have tasted battle on foreign shores, yet now we linger in these cold walls. Many riders question whether you remember the old ways." Daenerys faced them, letting her gaze pass from one man to the next. She noticed the tension in their stances, their desire for action. "I remember," she said firmly, her voice echoing in the enclosed space. "I remember the Khalasars that once roamed the plains, how we lived for the thrill of the gallop and the glory of conquest. But we stand in a different land now, and we face a different kind of battle." Ralco's brows drew together. "A battle without riding, without slaughter? Where's the glory in that?" She stepped forward, meeting his eyes. "Glory is found in victory, and victory sometimes requires more than blades and blood. We could charge headlong into King's Landing, yes. We would spill much blood, break many walls, and perhaps we would die in the attempt. Or we can wait until the moment is right, until our enemies are weak and desperate, and then strike with fire and fury. Which path ensures we triumph, and live to celebrate?" "Ban." A murmur ran through them. They cast sidelong glances at Drogon's massive form, as though recalling the unstoppable power that lay at her command. She continued, her tone strong. "Your patience is a gift you grant me. When the time comes, I promise you, there will be battles worthy of song. We will ride through the fields of Westeros, our enemies trembling before us. But until that time, you must trust me. Will you do that?" "Nandi?" For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Ralco dropped to one knee, lowering his head in submission. "We follow the blood of the dragon," he said. "We trust you, but do not leave us in this cage forever." Daenerys reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You have my word. I am Daenerys Stormborn, the unburnt, and I have not forgotten the old ways or the new." With that, the tension in the courtyard lessened. The other Dothraki followed Ralco's example, kneeling to reaffirm their loyalty. Drogon shifted overhead, releasing a low, rumbling growl that resonated in their chests. Daenerys felt a pulse of relief. For now, at least, her Khalasar remained united under her banner. In the following weeks, Daenerys' plan continued to unfold like a measured dance. More lords near King's Landing sent discreet messages, seeking terms of alliance. The roads under her protection enjoyed peace and rising trade. Her name passed from village to village as a rumor of hope, mingled with fear of dragons. The occupant of the Iron Throne grew increasingly isolated, though still too entrenched to topple overnight. Amid these developments, Torrhen the Braavosi envoy quietly reminded Daenerys and Tyrion of the growing debt accrued under the Iron Bank's loans. The interest, he asserted, would soon require partial repayment to assure Braavos of their stable partnership. Tyrion grimaced at the news, But Daenerys assured Torrhen that once certain lords pledged their resources, or once she held the treasury of King's Landing, she would meet those obligations. The envoy accepted this with polite deference, though Daenerys sensed the bank's gentle pressure. It was a reminder that while she built her new Westeros, she was never free of the binding threads of financial power. Still, that pressure did not weaken her resolve. She convened another war council in Dragonstone's Great Hall, summoning her closest advisors: Tyrion, Varys, Grey Worm, Missandei, Jorah, and Torrhen. Before them all, she placed a meticulously drawn map of the Crown lands, detailing each allied house, each known stronghold still loyal to the Crown, and the vital roads connecting them. Soon, she told them, letting her fingers rest on the map, we will have enough influence that King's Landing itself might capitulate without a long siege. Many of its people are hungry, weary of war. If we can encircle the city, control the flow of goods, it might surrender rather than endure more hardship. But only if we can coordinate our allies correctly. Tyrion leaned forward, considering her words. Yes, we don't want them to see us as tyrants starving out innocents. We have to balance necessity with mercy. Perhaps we use our new allied houses to blockade certain routes while allowing humanitarian supplies through. Enough to show we are not monsters. Varys nodded. The common folk will note our compassion, and the lords who remain stubbornly loyal to the throne will note our strength. A careful blend. Grey Worm tapped a point on the map. The approach from the Rosby Road is critical. If we station Unsullied there, we can prevent reinforcements from the north. Meanwhile, the Dothraki can patrol the rolling fields to the south. Then so, Daenerys agreed, glancing at Jorah. You will help oversee the transition of these smaller lords who have pledged their men. Keep an eye on them. If any prove false, I want to know immediately. Jorah bowed slightly. Yes, Your Grace. Lastly, her gaze fell on Torrhen, standing with hands folded. The Iron Bank will want to see a swift resolution. Once King's Landing is under my rule, you will have your repayments and your seat on my council as we agreed. He gave a small, polite bow. We look forward to the day, Your Grace. When the meeting ended, Daenerys sat back in the high-backed chair that served as her temporary throne. She felt the weight of the plan: blockades, strategic alliances, the threat of dragons, an entire tapestry of pressure woven around King's Landing. If successful, the city might fall without the catastrophic bloodshed that had stained so many past conquests. But if the occupant on the Iron Throne proved desperate enough, if cunning advisors whispered a last gambit, war could still ignite. She closed her eyes, summoning her courage. She could hear the faint cries of her dragons outside, carried on the wind. She remembered the hush of the Iron Bank's hall in Bravos, the swirl of possibility that had filled her chest as she inked her name on the parchment. This was the destiny she had chosen. No longer the frightened girl fleeing assassins, no longer the liberator stalled by endless rebellions, but a queen on the cusp of reclaiming her ancestral seat. Her father had tried to rule by fear alone. She intended to rule by respect, tempered with enough fear to keep the realm united. Nightfall came, and the halls of Dragonstone settled into quiet. Daenerys climbed the narrow steps to her chambers, torches casting dancing shadows on the walls. Once inside, she shrugged off her cloak and moved to the wide window overlooking the dark sea. Faint moonlight traced the waves with silver. Her mind drifted to what lay ahead, the final tightening of the noose around King's Landing, the moment she would stand before its gates with the might of dragons and the iron weight of the bank's gold behind her. In that vision, she saw the city's gates swing open, its people gazing up at her not with terror, but with a cautious hope. She imagined the Red Keep's halls echoing with new voices, voices that spoke of progress and reform, not merely survival. And she imagined placing herself on the Iron Throne, feeling the chill of the forged swords beneath her, determined to rule justly. Yet a faint ripple of doubt wove through her thoughts. Westeros had witnessed countless rulers come and go, each claiming they would do better than the last. Could she truly break the cycle of devastation? Could she keep her word and repay the Iron Bank while lifting this land out of ruin? She swallowed, reminded herself that no victory was won without risks. The realm deserved a queen willing to take those risks without succumbing to the madness that once plagued her lineage. She allowed herself a final moment of reflection before seeking sleep. She pictured the faces of those who followed her. Grey Worm, unwavering and disciplined. Tyrion, brilliant and cunning. Missandei, loyal and compassionate. Jorah, steadfast in his devotion. The Dothraki, with their fierce spirit that had recognized her as a true Khal. The Unsullied, who trusted her leadership as they once had for no other. And far away, the small folk, who had whispered her name with a mixture of awe and longing. All of them rested on her shoulders. All of them believed she could bring a new dawn to this war-racked kingdom. She closed the window shutters, whispering a soft prayer to whatever gods might listen. That she would keep her wits sharp, her heart steady, and her resolve unbroken. For once morning came, the dance would resume, another round of letters, of gold exchanged, of alliances cemented, all leading ever closer to the day she would march with her full strength. She was Daenerys Targaryen, and she would neither be rushed nor delayed by the faltering game of lesser rulers. In her hands lay the power of gold and the might of dragons. And with both, she would buy and burn her way into the very bedrock of Westeros' future. Ka-Kai. Morning light broke over Dragonstone's spires, painting the ancient walls with the first pale strokes of dawn. Daenerys woke to the muted roll of distant waves, her dreams of throne rooms and masked lords still clinging to her consciousness. She rose from her bed slowly, letting the chill air sharpen her senses as she dressed in a gown of dark blue and silver. A pang of anticipation fluttered behind her ribs. Today, she intended to finalize the distribution of her forces, to begin in earnest the tightening of that invisible net around King's Landing. She felt both eagerness and caution coursing through her veins. She climbed a narrow set of winding steps to a small terrace overlooking the sea. From there, she saw the new ships moored in Dragonstone's harbor, their sails snug against the masts, carrying banners of Targaryen black and red, or the insignia of Braavosi lenders. Already, she could make out the silhouettes of sailors at work, loading crates of provisions for the next stage of their slow encirclement. The breeze lifted her hair, and she inhaled the scent of salt and seaweed, thinking of how this fortress had once been only a distant name in her imagination. A scatter of footsteps announced the arrival of Missandei, who approached with her customary calm. "Your Grace," she said softly, pausing just behind Daenerys. "Tyrion wishes to hold council in the war room within the hour. He says news has come from House Bywater." Daenerys turned, smiling gently at the woman who had been her voice and her rock through so many trials. "I will attend. Let's see if House Bywater's caution has finally matured into something more useful." Missandei inclined her head, gesturing for Daenerys to follow. The two descended the stairs, past corridors that echoed with the clamor of the new day. Servants bustled about with trays of food, and the occasional Dothraki warrior hurried by, restless and purposeful. Tyrion waited in the council chamber with Varys, Grey Worm, Torrhen from the Iron Bank, and a handful of scribes. The table was littered with maps and missives. The Braavosi envoy stood aside, thumbing through his ledger as though measuring each cost carefully. When Daenerys stepped into the room, conversation dipped. Tyrion offered a quick bow of his head. "Your Grace," he began, lifting a letter sealed with a modest sigil. "We've just received word from House Bywater. They have officially declared for you, under certain conditions. They ask for immediate support rebuilding sections of their keep, which apparently burned in an attack by outlaws last year. They also request a guarantee of trade privileges once King's Landing is in your hands." "Then now," Daenerys studied the letter. "Are these privileges significant?" Tyrion flashed a small grin. "Not excessively. They want to levy minimal tolls on merchant caravans passing their lands, essentially the same arrangement we've offered others. I see no issue, as long as it secures their loyalty." "Mixer." She glanced at Missandei, who was already noting the request. "They shall have what they need," Daenerys replied, then faced Grey Worm. "I'd like a contingent of Unsullied to lend a hand in fortifying House Bywater's keep, ensure the outlaws remain scattered. We can't allow roving marauders to tear down the alliances we've worked so hard to build." Grey Worm placed a fist over his heart. "I will send them at once." Torrhen cleared his throat, setting down his ledger. Your Grace, the bank is prepared to finance these fortifications. As part of our ongoing arrangement, we shall release the funds immediately, though we trust you will not forget the importance of maintaining the agreed schedule for repayment. Once the crown's treasury is yours. Daenerys' gaze slipped to him, and she offered a calm nod. You shall have your repayment, Torrhen. And the bank will, no doubt, profit handsomely when we open new markets across the Seven Kingdoms. I know. Torrhen's expression remained measured, neither pleased nor displeased, as though her assurance was the expected formality. We have confidence in you, Your Grace, he said politely, returning his attention to a stack of parchments. Tyrion set aside Bywater's letter and retrieved another. This one's from a minor knight in the Rosby region. He claims to speak for some local farmers who want relief from taxes imposed by the current occupant on the throne. They too wonder what your rule would look like. It seems your success in clearing bandits from the roads has inspired common folk to petition you directly. Never messo. Daenerys pressed her lips together thoughtfully. The common folk are as important as any lord, if we are truly to forge a stable realm. Missandei, draft a reply in my name. Let them know that once Rosby's loyalty is firm, we will ensure fairer taxation, offer them a taste of the stability to come. Let them see that their faith in me is not misplaced. Missandei nodded. I will see to it. Varys, standing behind the table with arms folded, gave a quiet murmur of approval. You have the people's ear in a way few monarchs ever do, Your Grace. Your reputation as a liberator, combined with well-placed coin, sows quiet revolutions in their minds. The seeds of your rule have taken root. Daenerys recognized the subtle hint of pride in his voice. She remembered all the times Varys had claimed to serve the good of the realm. How he'd thrown his support behind her, believing she might be the one to mend Westeros. She offered him a brief smile, then turned her attention to the large map pinned across the table. Tiny carved figures marked the positions of allied houses, the crown's defenses, and the roads now patrolled by her forces. Each day, fewer gaps remained. The lines of power in the crown lands were shifting in her favor. Tell me of King's Landing, she asked, brushing a hand across the map's depiction of the city's high walls and winding streets. Any new word from within? Varys exchanged a glance with Tyrion before speaking. There are conflicting rumors. Some say there's fear building in the Red Keep. Your dragons loom large in every whispered tale. Others insist that the crown has begun readying wildfire caches. Should you attempt a direct assault? If that's true, it would mean the occupant on the throne is prepared to burn the city rather than yield it. History threatens to repeat itself, it seems. Daenerys' jaw tightened. Memories of her father's madness and the warnings she'd heard from Barristan Selmy came rushing back. We can't allow that. I will not let thousands of innocent lives be snuffed out, just to maintain the vanity of an unstable ruler. Benchamo. Tyrion's face was grave. Desperate monarchs do desperate things. We must tread carefully. The best course remains to tighten the noose until surrender seems the only rational choice. Daenerys nodded. Then we proceed. I want more houses on our side. Tyrion, any word from the Vale or the Reach? We've concentrated on the Crown lands, but I don't want the others blindsiding us. He cleared his throat, rifling through a sheaf of letters. The Reach is fractured after the fall of House Tyrell and subsequent turmoil. Some of the mid-tier houses there are likely open to negotiation, especially with the promise of fresh coin and stable trade routes. But they're also wary. The Reach's farmland is bountiful, and whichever side wins the conflict, they want to ensure they remain in good standing. So it may take a bold gesture, or perhaps a demonstration of your generosity, to win them over. Daenerys rested a hand on the table's edge. Then let's do it. Allocate a portion of our resources, grain or coin or rebuilding efforts, to a few key houses in the Reach. Show them we mean to restore order, not merely take. That might be enough to sway them. None. Varys inclined his head. A wise move, Your Grace. The Vale remains cautious under its own leadership, but we know they guard their passes fiercely. If they choose neutrality, at least they won't reinforce King's Landing. For the moment, it's enough. She took a slow breath, allowing her gaze to sweep the chamber. We must remember to keep the Dothraki engaged. Grey Worm, Once you send off the next wave of Unsullied to Bywater, prepare a plan for the Dothraki to patrol our flank in the southern Crown lands. I want them visible, but not destructive. A show of force, nothing more. Na Sinin. Grey Worm gave a crisp nod. Yes, Your Grace. They spent the next hour organizing the finer details. Missandei took notes on logistics. Tyrion composed letters in his neat angular script, reading them aloud so Daenerys could approve each phrase. Varys offered small bits of intelligence gleaned from his network, reassuring them that no large-scale muster of crown forces had yet threatened her positions. Torrhen listened quietly, occasionally suggesting how best to distribute funds for maximum political effect. By the time the council adjourned, Daenerys felt the stir of momentum pulsing in every corner of her plan. She stepped from the war room into the daylight, finding that the sun had ascended high above Dragonstow's towers. She decided to walk the ramparts and check on her dragons. For some time, she had kept them near the fortress, letting them hunt sea creatures along the rocky coast, mindful that if they ranged too far inland, they might incite terror among the very people she aimed to win over. As she climbed a set of winding steps, she was joined by Jorah Mormont, who came bearing a small pack slung over his shoulder. "You're always busy, Ser Jorah," Daenerys remarked with a gentle smile. "Tell me, have you had any rest?" He offered a slight bow. "A little. My duties keep me well occupied, carrying messages to your new allies, meeting traveling knights along the roads to assure them of your good intentions. It's encouraging, Your Grace. How many are open to your rule when they realize you desire more than to raise their field?" Mepeter. She thought of all the times she'd used fire to bend slavers to her will in Essos. In those days it had felt righteous, an act of liberation. Now in Westeros, she walked a narrower path. She could not appear a monstrous conqueror. "We will show them that Targaryen rule can be just," she said softly. "And if some refuse to see reason, we will remind them that dragons are not easily denied." They emerged onto a broad parapet. Rhaegal and Viserion lounged near the far edge, the wind ruffling their scaled necks. Drogon was nowhere in sight, likely off wheeling above the coastline. Jorah studied the two dragons warily. Despite his loyalty, he would never entirely lose that human caution around creatures capable of incinerating entire armies. Daenerys, however, approached with confidence, running a hand along Rhaegal's flank. The dragon's eyelid fluttered, and he released a low rumbling note. In the space of that moment, she felt the old bond flare, a reminder of the raw power sleeping under her command. Were she a lesser woman, she would unleash these dragons at once, forcing every stubborn house to bend or burn. But she had learned from the heartbreak in Essos that fear alone sowed seeds of rebellion, and she was determined not to inherit a broken realm. "I plan to ride Drogon soon," she said, half to Jorah and half to herself. "I want the Crownlands to see us pass overhead, to know that while I extend the hand of friendship, the dragons will not be caged forever." Jorah nodded, a touch of admiration in his voice. "A measured display. It will remind them that the choice truly is theirs, alliance or opposition." She let her hand linger on Rhaegal, feeling the steady pulse of life beneath the scales, then turned from the parapet. "Come, Ser Jorah, we have more to do." They made their way back into the castle. The day was a blur of tasks, signing missives, conferring with new arrivals seeking her banner, settling minor disputes among Sellswords who argued over pay. She noted every coin spent in her mind, aware that each piece of gold was borrowed against her future success. Eventually, dusk approached, and a hush fell over Dragonstone's courtyards as the laborers packed up their tools. The scullions prepared dinner, and soldiers rotated their watch shifts. Daenerys took her evening meal in the hall alongside Tyrion, Missandei, Grey Worm, and a few others. The conversation ranged from the day's events to the next steps. Who among the lords might yet join them? How soon they could expect a response from the minor houses in the Reach. Wine flowed, though in moderation, and Daenerys felt an undercurrent of cautious optimism. When night settled fully, she slipped away from the table, her mind already racing. She decided to ascend Dragonstone's highest tower, a place where the wind hissed through crumbling stone embrasures, and where one could see the faint lights of King's Landing on a clear night. With a lantern in hand, She climbed the spiral staircase, each step echoing in the lonely confines until she emerged into the open sky. Stars glittered in a grand sweep overhead. The sea stretched out, black and endless, below the tower's vantage. She stepped to the edge, setting the lantern down. For a moment, she let her eyes roam southward, where, somewhere beyond the darkness, the sprawl of King's Landing and the Red Keep awaited. She could almost imagine the city streets, the labyrinth of alleyways, the uneasy citizens who whispered her name. She wondered how many children fell asleep at night dreaming of a queen who might feed them rather than tax them into starvation, a queen who might spare them the horrors of war. She wondered too if those in power still labored under illusions that a few archers or siege engines could stop dragonfire. At length, Tyrion appeared on the winding steps, panting slightly from the climb. He paused, catching his breath. "Your Grace, I've grown up in castles my entire life, but I swear Dragonstone has more stairs than any fortress in Westeros." She allowed a small laugh. "You'll be grateful for those stairs if we ever have to repel a siege. Fewer ways for invaders to approach." He gave a half chuckle, then joined her near the crenellations. The wind tugged at his hair as he surveyed the black water. "I suppose you're thinking of what lies across that expanse. Perhaps you can see the faint glimmer of King's Landing on a clear night." She tilted her head, attempting to make out a distant glow. The horizon was too dark for her to be certain. "I imagine them there, preparing, searching for ways to outmaneuver us. Yet we push ever closer, day by day." "Near." Tyrion's eyes were pensive. "Sometimes I wonder if all this measured advance, all this cunning and courtesy, is truly the best path. Then I recall the last war of conquest. Fields burned, people starved. If your father had his way, half the city would have gone up in green flames. Yes, I believe this approach is wiser." She nodded, falling silent for a few moments. The wind sighed between them, laden with the brine of the sea. "I find myself balancing on a razor's edge, Tyrion. One misstep, one sign of hesitancy, and our enemies might regroup. One show of excessive force, and we might become the very tyrants we claim to overthrow." "Ben," he offered a grave nod. "Leadership is never easy. But you have something those other would-be monarchs lacked. A vision that extends beyond your personal ambition. You genuinely wish to improve the realm." She turned to meet his gaze, eyes glimmering with earnestness. "I do. I want the throne my family built, but not simply to sit on it. I want to see Westeros bloom again." Tyrion fell quiet, then gestured at the lantern's fluttering flame. "Shall I leave you to your thoughts?" Daenerys shook her head, deciding she'd had enough solitude. "No, stay. We can discuss what tomorrow will bring. My flight on Drogon, the next wave of envoys. And perhaps for a moment we can simply enjoy the quiet." They stood side by side, words drifting between them about the intricacies of forging alliances and the comedic absurdities of certain lords' demands. Occasionally, Tyrion's wit coaxed a smile from her, reminding her that amid the constant strain of leadership, moments of levity could keep a mind balanced. She valued his presence as an advisor who bore the scars of his own family's rule, and as a friend who truly believed in her cause. Eventually, the cold night air grew harsher, and they descended the tower. Each step down seemed to mark the transition back into the swirl of duty. Daenerys returned to her chambers, mind buzzing with plans for the next day's flight. She had decided to pass above several key strongholds, places still wavering in their loyalty, allowing them a glimpse of Drogon's might. It was a dance of intimidation and reassurance, a sign that she would not hesitate to bring her dragons if pressed, and that, if they welcomed her, she would spare them the dragonfire. She imagined lords stepping onto their battlements, their hearts caught in their throats as she soared overhead. That night, she slept lightly, stirring at every gust of wind against the shutters, mind alight with the myriad possibilities. When dawn broke, she rose before the sun. Clad in warm leathers, she strode into the courtyard where Drogon awaited, half dozing, but roused by her approach. The fortress glowed in the pre-dawn light, and unsullied guards stood at attention, used to the sight of their queen and her dragon. A handful of Dothraki lingered nearby, ready for a ride across the Crown Lands, though they would travel on horseback while Daenerys rode above. She advanced to Drogon, placing a hand on his snout. He exhaled, hot breath steaming the chill air. Her pulse quickened. He was colossal now, his body longer than a galley, his wings vast and leathery, powerful enough to churn storms of dust. She remembered when he could fit on her shoulder. Mounting him required a careful climb onto his harness. Once secure, she signaled with the reins, though she knew Drogon obeyed more from their bond than any strap of leather. With a thunderous beat of wings, he launched into the air, sending a gale of wind across the courtyard. The Dothraki cheered from below, some raising their arms in salute. Daenerys felt Drogon's heartbeat thrumming beneath her, stronger than any warhorse. Higher and higher they soared, the towers of Dragonstone shrinking rapidly, the sea unfurling beneath them in a vast expanse of gray-blue. She guided Drogon inland, letting him climb above the choppy waves before angling toward the rolling plains of the Crown Lands. The wind tore at her hair, and she felt exhilaration welling in her chest. This was the pure power of the Targaryen legacy, a freedom beyond mortal constraints. Yet she was not here merely to revel. She had a purpose. Below, the land spread out like a tapestry of fields, villages, and winding roads. In the distance, she glimpsed a squat fortress that she recognized as belonging to one of the newly aligned houses. She circled once, allowing Drogon's shadow to pass over the ramparts. Far beneath, men ran out to watch, some shading their eyes. She did not descend to speak. Her presence was enough. It was an announcement that the Targaryen queen was not idle. As she flew on, she glimpsed a band of travelers on a road. Their hats flew off as they looked up, and one knelt, as if half in awe, half in terror. She recalled Tyrion's words, a measured display. They would carry tales of this flight far and wide, reinforcing that Daenerys Targaryen's dragons were no mere rumor. Hours passed in the sky. She soared over farmland, crisscrossed with canals and dotted with small villages. Smoke rose from the chimneys of huts, ordinary folk going about their daily labor. Sometimes she spotted children pointing at the sky, and she imagined their squeals of excitement or fear. The Dothraki, far behind on horseback, would spread a similar message on the ground. They'd ride through these lands with enough discipline not to pillage, but with enough swagger to show they were fearless. It was a fine line, and she trusted Grey Worm had chosen the riders carefully. At length, she turned Drogon back toward the sea, letting him rest his wings by gliding on brisk coastal winds. The sun had climbed high, warming her despite the chill air of flight. Thoughts circled in her mind, weaving images of the realm she hoped to shape. A realm where no child cowered beneath a tyrant's boot, where lords might be accountable to something greater than their own pride, and where she could repay the Iron Bank before its demands became a chain around her rule. When Dragonstone's silhouette emerged once more, Daenerys guided Drogon into a steep descent. He landed heavily in the courtyard, scattering dust and straw dust. She dismounted, patting his flank as a stable hand scrambled forward with buckets of water and raw meat for the exhausted dragon. Dothraki riders began trickling in soon after, lathered horses panting, the men calling out in triumphant voices about how far they had ridden. A few boasted of glimpses from local farmers who bowed at the sight of the silver-haired Khaleesi's men. Grey Worm awaited Daenerys near the steps to the Great Hall. "Your flight was seen by many, Your Grace," he reported. "Word will spread quickly." She nodded, drawing a deep breath. "Good. Let them talk. Next, we'll solidify the alliances we've begun. The realm must know I do not rely on dragons alone, but also that I have not forgotten their power." They returned to the war room, where Tyrion and Missandei were already fielding new messages. A breathless squire from House Bywater brought news that a roving band of outlaws had dared to test the newly formed local defenses. The Unsullied, stationed by Daenerys' orders, had swiftly crushed them. Word of mouth was elevating her name among the peasantry. Another letter came from an uncertain house to the west, politely requesting a meeting to discuss terms of allegiance. Daenerys signed her consent, deciding to greet this house envoy personally in Dragonstone. By mid-afternoon, a hush fell over the castle, as men took their meals and found respite from the day's labors. Daenerys took the opportunity to withdraw to her solar. There, A small fire crackled in the hearth, taking the edge off the coastal chill. She sank into a chair, letting her tired muscles relax. Missandei brought a pot of tea, the aroma of mint curling on the air. "Your Grace, you seem weary," Missandei observed with gentle concern. "Shall I call for a healer? Or perhaps your bedchamber?" Daenerys waved the offer off, though she smiled at her friend's kindness. "Just a moment's rest will suffice." "Thank you, Missandei." She cradled the teacup between her hands, sipping slowly, letting the warmth settle in her. "Where would I be without you?" she murmured. Missandei bowed her head, but a trace of affection shone in her eyes. "You would still be Daenerys Targaryen, the unburnt, but perhaps a little less organized." A breath of laughter escaped Daenerys. Too true. She gazed into the fire, her thoughts drifting again toward King's Landing. So many nights she found her mind returning to that city, picturing the Red Keep's silhouette against the sky, the labyrinth of politics she would inherit. For all her caution, she knew that eventually, a decisive move would be required. One final push to shatter the crown's illusions and open the gates. As if reading her thoughts, Missandei said softly, "The occupant of the throne cannot remain blind to your progress. They must see your growing alliances, the shifting loyalty of the crown lands." "Mentor." Daenerys' gaze flicked up, and she nodded. "They see it, I'm sure. Their pride won't let them yield easily, though. Perhaps they still believe we'll make a mistake, or that some hidden ally will rescue them." Her friend's expression grew thoughtful. "Then it falls to us not to err, and to ensure no rescue is possible. Every house that joins us makes the next defection simpler. Every road we secure tightens their isolation." Daenerys reached across the table to clasp Missandei's hand. "I value your counsel," she said quietly. "You speak with clarity that cuts through the clamor in my mind." Missandei blushed, lowering her eyes. "You honor me too greatly." They shared a smile, then returned to the tasks at hand. Missandei brought her a fresh list of items that required Daenerys' signature. Authorization for the next wave of funds to be sent to the houses under her protection, letters affirming new trade deals, final instructions for the meeting with the envoy arriving in 2 days. Each piece of parchment was another strand in the web she wove around the Iron Throne. By the time she finished, evening shadows stretched across the solar, and a messenger came to announce that dinner was served in the hall. Over that evening meal, the mood among her closest advisors was cautiously triumphant. Tyrion's wit found an appreciative audience in Varys, who sipped wine with a tight-lipped smile. Grey Worm reported minimal trouble on the roads. Jorah spoke of meeting traveling peddlers who openly praised Daenerys' sense of justice. Even Torrhen, though ever reserved, complimented the efficient use of the bank's gold. Daenerys allowed herself a rare moment of unguarded satisfaction. Her campaign to buy Westeros with the Iron Bank's resources, tempered by diplomatic finesse, was bearing fruit faster than some had expected. However, as the last courses were cleared and the candles burned low, a raven arrived bearing news that shifted the tone of the evening. The letter, penned in a hurried hand, revealed that a small force of the Crown's remaining loyal knights had ambushed one of her convoys traveling from the Rosby region. The convoy was mostly supply wagons, guarded by a handful of sellswords. Casualties were not massive, but the wagons had been set aflame, and any survivors had fled back to Rosby or been taken captive. Tyrion's jaw tensed as he read the message aloud. Missandei pressed her lips together, eyes flicking to Daenerys. Grey Worm's hand tightened on the table. The occupant of the throne, it seemed, was not content to sit idle while her influence spread. Daenerys felt a flare of anger rise in her chest, that old dragon fire stirring behind her eyes. She set down her goblet with a careful, deliberate movement. "So, they have begun harassing our lines, drawing blood. A bold gesture, considering their dwindling resources. Now," Tyrion inhaled, trying to maintain composure. "Indeed, they must be attempting to disrupt our momentum, or provoke a rash reaction. If we respond in fury, we risk losing the moral high ground. But we cannot ignore such acts." Daenerys stared at the flickering candle, imagining the flames consuming her supply wagons. She thought of the farmers who relied on that food. Grey Worm, dispatch a unit of Unsullied to secure those roads again. We cannot allow any more ambushes. If you encounter Crown forces, drive them off, but do not slaughter them outright if they surrender. Make it clear we offer mercy, but we do not tolerate unprovoked attacks." Nati. Grey Worm stood, bowing his head. "I will organize them at once, Your Grace." Torrhen cleared his throat. "If the Crown is resorting to sabotage, it may indicate they are closer to desperation than we realized. Their treasury is likely too empty to fund a formal campaign, so they resort to raids and intimidation." Daenerys felt a grim satisfaction at the idea of them being driven to desperate measures. Yet the cost in lives and supplies weighed on her. She rose from the table, the scrape of her chair echoing in the hall. "No more open paths for them to strike at. We will strengthen every route under our protection. Let them see our power wherever they turn." Thus resolved, they parted for the night. Daenerys did not retreat to her chambers immediately. Instead, she walked the corridors of Dragonstone, escorted by two unsullied with torches. The stone floors echoed beneath her boots. In a darkened antechamber, she paused before a carved relief of dragons swirling in a dance across ancient volcanic rock. The sculptor, likely centuries gone, had captured the dragons in fluid motion, their wings sweeping with regal menace. She traced a fingertip over the etched lines. "Fire and blood," she whispered, recalling the Targaryen words. But now she would add gold to that litany. Gold and fire. Together, they were rewriting the usual narrative of conquest. At length she continued to her bedchamber, keenly aware of the new tension thrumming through her. Crown forces had begun to lash out. This was but the first sting. There would be more. Yet each skirmish that ended in Daenerys' favor, each ambush thwarted, would only strengthen her image as the realm's protector against chaos. And if the occupant on the throne chose to escalate, well, Daenerys had the Iron Bank's deep coffers and 3 living dragons at her command. Sleep came late and restless. Dawn found her awake, pensively watching the first hints of light glow beyond the horizon. She summoned Missandei to draft a stern message to the Crown, condemning their treacherous ambush and warning that further acts of aggression would be met with swift retribution. The letter was firm yet offered a path to parley, should the Crown desire to avoid a larger conflict. Daenerys suspected it would be ignored or scorned, but she sent it anyway, wanting the realm to see that she had extended an olive branch before resorting to force. The next few days brought a flurry of activity. Unsullied detachments fanned out, reinforcing roads that converged on Rosby and Bywater. Dothraki scouts ranged wide, watching for any sign of Crown knights or mercenaries creeping through the countryside. Word reached Dragonstone that the Crown had demanded additional tribute from their remaining loyal lords, likely an attempt to fund more raids. This forced many of those lords to weigh the risks of continuing their allegiance. More than one quietly reached out to Daenerys' envoys, sensing that backing her might soon be the safer bet. Tyrion directed these exchanges with a deft hand, penning letters that walked the line between enticement and warning. Varys supplied names of those who might be most persuadable, while Missandei handled the formalities of addresses and seals. Torrhen watched the spending of Braavosi gold, occasionally stepping in to suggest a more efficient distribution of funds. Daenerys appreciated his practicality, though she sensed the bank's silent desire to see the throne secured soon. Every day they waited, interest on her debt climbed. In the midst of this controlled storm of negotiations and maneuvers, the envoy from a western house arrived by ship. He was an older knight, broad-shouldered, draped in a worn cloak, bearing a crest of oak leaves. Daenerys received him in Dragonstone's great hall. The columns loomed overhead and 2 of her dragons prowled the courtyard beyond, occasionally visible through the windows. The envoy, Sir Meridon, approached with uneasy steps. His retinue consisted of 2 lesser knights and a scribe. He bowed, his gaze flicking nervously to the shadows at the edges of the hall where Dothraki stood guard. "Your Grace, I come on behalf of House Oakhearth. My lord extends greetings and curiosity about your terms." Wayne. Daenerys studied him. "Welcome, Sir Meridon. I trust your voyage was smooth." He gave a polite nod. "Some rough waters, but nothing we couldn't manage. My lord was intrigued by your letters, your promise of rebuilding and just governance. He wonders, however, how these promises fare in the face of your father's legacy. With no disrespect intended, of course." Tyrion, standing at Daenerys' side, let out a small cough that might have been a stifled scoff. But Daenerys answered evenly, "I am not my father. The realm needs no more tyrants. I offer House Oakhearth a place in the future of Westeros, where gold and goodwill can achieve more than endless wars. If your lord swears fealty, he shall keep his lands and find them prospering under my reign." "Nain?" Sir Meriadoc hesitated, glancing at the dragons beyond the windows. Their distant roars punctuated the hush. And if he refuses, Daenerys' eyes hardened, then he remains loyal to a dying regime. "I will not let the occupant of the throne continue to harm the realm with raids and taxes that starve the people. In time, resistance will be swept aside. I would prefer House Oakhearth join me willingly, to spare us both needless bloodshed." "No." Silence weighed in the hall. Sir Meriadoc scribe scribbled notes on parchment. At last, the envoy drew a breath. "My lord is inclined to accept, provided you can guarantee we will not be left vulnerable to retribution from the crown until you fully claim the throne." Tyrion answered this time, stepping forward. "Her Grace's forces already patrol a wide stretch of land. We will extend our protection to House Oakhearth. Any who seek to punish you for this decision will face the combined might of the Unsullied, the Dothraki, and the loyalty of other houses already aligned with us." "No, who?" Sir Meriadoc nodded slowly, relief battling the last vestiges of fear in his eyes. "Very well. I will relay your words. If my lord finds the terms acceptable, we shall dispatch an official token of fealty within the fortnight." Daenerys inclined her head. "I look forward to it. May our next meeting be one of warm alliance." "Down there." They exchanged formal bows, and Daenerys watched Sir Meriadoc depart with the same unease that so many seemed to carry. Yet it was another crack in the crown's foundation, another house drifting into her orbit. Each defection chipped away at the illusion of stability in King's Landing. A day later, Grey Worm returned with news that his men had engaged a small crown scouting party near Rosby. The enemy had attempted another ambush, but the Unsullied met them with disciplined ferocity. Once outmatched, the Crown Knights surrendered, and Grey Worm took them prisoner without slaughter. That gesture of restraint bore fruit when one of the knights, frightened of execution, confessed that the occupant of the throne was desperately trying to organize a counter-offensive, but lacked the coin to arm more men. They were gambling on quick strikes to disrupt Daenerys' supply lines, hoping to buy time for some alliance or windfall to materialize. Daenerys found the revelation unsurprising. Desperation and cunning made for dangerous enemies, but also brittle ones. "We will not lose momentum," she declared in council. "Tyrion, press our advantage. Use this confession to assure the waverers that the crown can no longer protect them. Inform them that the occupant of the throne has grown so desperate, they send knights on suicide raids. Let them see which side truly holds the future." And so it went. Letters flew across the Crownlands and beyond. The roads under Daenerys' control swelled with caravans bearing her banner, guarded by unsullied spears. Townsfolk began to speak of a queen who cared enough to defend them even before wearing the crown. Whispers reached Dragonstone that the occupant of the throne fumed behind closed doors, raging at each new house that slipped away. Yet no open confrontation came. Perhaps they still hoped a foreign power would intervene, or that Daenerys would blunder. Weeks slipped by, each day forging stronger links in the chain that Daenerys wrapped around King's Landing. The blockade was partial at first, but soon her forces ringed the city's outskirts, halting or redirecting shipments that once flowed unchecked. Rather than starve the citizens, Daenerys' men allowed basic foodstuffs through, while barring all deliveries of arms or luxuries meant for the crown. The message was clear. The Queen-in-Waiting would not punish the people, but she would squeeze the false monarch who clung to the throne. Within King's Landing, discontent churned. Increasingly, the common folk grumbled about paying higher taxes only to see no relief from the outrages of bandits or the burdens of a stalling economy. Various whispers hinted that some within the Red Keep now counseled negotiation, urging the crown to treat with Daenerys. Others, hawkish and proud, demanded a final stand, perhaps a resort to wildfire or some other monstrous tactic. Each rumor was a thread in a tapestry of tension that loomed over the realm. Daenerys herself felt a quiet, mounting certainty. She had weathered sabotage, forged alliances, used the Iron Bank's gold with care. Now, her net lay almost fully formed. A final decision point approached, the moment when she would either force the gates or accept a surrender. And though her heart yearned to claim the throne quickly, she listened to Tyrion's counsel, reminding herself that time remained on her side. Each day the crown grew weaker, and her name grew stronger. In those days, she often dreamed of the Iron Throne itself, jagged swords fused by dragon flame, an artifact of her ancestors' conquest. She would see herself approach it in silence, the great hall empty, echoes of footsteps ringing in her ears. As she reached out to claim it, she would sense a presence behind her. Sometimes it was her father's ghost. Sometimes it was a horde of nameless figures, all representing the cost of power. She would awaken with her hand clenched, pulse racing, uncertain if she had grasped the throne or fled from it. By morning's light, she resolved anew that she would break this cycle of cruelty. On a windy morning, she stood atop Dragonstow's battlements alongside Tyrion and Grey Worm, gazing across the choppy sea. The sky was steel gray, threatening rain. Ships bearing her sigil dotted the harbor, while a handful of Braavosi vessels stood at anchor, loaded with goods for future expansions of her forces. She turned to Tyrion, the wind tugging at her silver hair. "When we march on King's Landing, I want it to be clear that we come as liberators, not butchers," she said. "Is everything in place for a swift capture of the city? Should they refuse surrender?" Tyrion squinted against the gust. "Well, in place as can be. We've identified key gates, potential weak points in the walls, and how to disrupt their supplies. We also know the City Watch is underpaid and susceptible to bribery, though that can be a double-edged sword, as loyalty so easily bought can be lost again." Nos. Grey Worm's dark eyes were resolute. "The Unsullied will breach any gate you command, Your Grace. But we will do so with discipline, so fewer innocents are harmed." She gripped the parapet, recalling the horrors of war in Astapor, Yunkai, and Marine Ono. She had once believed that freeing slaves would instantly earn her the love of all. But she had learned that power brought complexities, resentments, and betrayal. Here, in Westeros, she hoped to forge a different path, using gold and alliances to minimize the bloodshed. Yet she could not entirely avoid it. Tyrants seldom relinquished power peaceably. Tyrion cleared his throat. "There is one more matter, Your Grace. The Iron Bank's envoy has requested a private audience." Her brows arched. "Torrhen? Very well. Let us meet him." A flicker of apprehension stirred in her. The Braavosi gold had fueled much of her progress, but debts always came calling, especially in times of near victory. They descended to the council chamber. Torrhen awaited them, standing stiff-backed in a well-tailored black doublet. His dark eyes flicked over Daenerys as she entered. He bowed precisely. "Your Grace, thank you for seeing me on short notice." She offered a polite tilt of her head. "How may I help the Iron Bank today?" Torrhen paused, choosing his words carefully. "The bank is pleased with your progress. We see that your influence grows daily. However, with that growth comes a corresponding rise in the sum owed, particularly as more funds have been released to support your expansion. Our interest accumulates." Tyrion lifted a hand. "We have not forgotten. Once King's Landing is secured, the Crown's treasury, as well as new trade revenues, will repay the bank with the agreed interest." Torrhen inclined his head, but his posture remained tense. "We request a token payment soon, a gesture of good faith. The bank's patience is not endless. We do not require the entire sum, but a portion that ensures our shareholders remain confident in this venture." Daenerys felt a flare of annoyance. She had carefully balanced every coin to maintain her alliances and feed her soldiers. Token payment might destabilize some of her carefully arranged plans, but she forced a serene expression. "I understand. We will arrange for partial repayment, perhaps from taxes collected in the newly aligned territories. It may delay some of our fortifications, but I'm sure we can manage." Torrhen watched her carefully. We appreciate your cooperation, Your Grace. In return, we reaffirm our commitment to your cause. Our ships remain at your disposal, and any final sums needed to achieve your victory will be provided without hesitation. Daenerys inhaled slowly, calm yet firm. I expect no less. She glanced at Tyrion. We will sort out which portion of our funds can be directed to this partial payment. Let us ensure it does not undermine our next moves. Tyrion nodded, mentally juggling the figures. Torrhen bowed once more and departed. Daenerys watched him go, feeling the weight of the Iron Bank's invisible chains. She had bartered for their support, and they had delivered. But now, the final act of her conquest loomed, and the bank wanted reassurance. If she faltered or delayed, would they abandon her at this crucial hour? Possibly, or at least threaten to. Tyrion placed a reassuring hand on the edge of the table. Worry not, Your Grace. We'll procure enough to satisfy them. A fraction from each allied territory's tribute, perhaps. It's a worthwhile trade if it keeps them content until the end. She exhaled. We will do what must be done. Gold for gold, until I sit the throne and open the realm's coffers. Then the Iron Bank will have no complaints. With that settled, she turned her attention to finalizing the blockade. The next few days were a controlled storm of decisions. Which roads to close off entirely, which to allow minimal traffic, how best to preserve local goodwill so that the city's folk did not starve. Missandei sent out new instructions to lords who had pledged to watch the main highways, ensuring no war supplies slipped through to the Red Keep. Reports trickled in. The crown tried to bribe passing merchants, but with Daenerys controlling the roads and paying better, many refused to risk it. Tension simmered. The occupant on the throne could not remain passive for long. Everyone at Dragonstone expected some final gambit, but nothing came. No grand army, no cunning infiltration. Only a sporadic raid here, a desperate letter there. In this uneasy lull, Daenerys' hold solidified further. One morning, near the close of summer, a flock of ravens arrived. Among them was a sealed message bearing the royal sigil, addressed to Daenerys Targaryen. The courier who delivered it looked pale and nervous, as though carrying a viper in a basket. Tyrion opened the scroll in Daenerys' presence, eyes scanning the words. His face betrayed a flicker of surprise. "What does it say?" Daenerys asked, her voice low. Tyrion handed her the parchment. She read it carefully. The occupant on the throne demanded a meeting, an armistice in theory, to discuss terms that might prevent further bloodshed. The language bristled with hostility, but the request for a parley was there, couched in stiff courtly phrasing. They proposed a neutral site just outside the city, near the ruins of an old tower by the Blackwater. Strict conditions were listed: minimal retinues, no dragons overhead. The letter reeked of desperation and cunning in equal measure. Missandei glanced between them. This could be a trap. Varys murmured his agreement. Likely so. They might use the meeting to capture or kill you, Your Grace, hoping to break your cause. Tyrion shrugged. Or it might be genuine. They see the writing on the wall and want a chance to bargain their way out. If we refuse, we risk looking like we spurn peace. Daenerys looked at the letter again, then lifted her gaze to her council. I will not walk into a foolish trap, but neither will I ignore a chance to spare the realm a final bloody battle. I must consider it carefully. Well, Grey Worm pressed a fist to his chest. If you go, we will protect you. But I advise against traveling without your dragon. She drew a measured breath, feeling the tension coil in her shoulders. They demanded no dragons, but perhaps Drogon can circle nearby, unseen until I call. Tyrion rubbed his chin thoughtfully. That might be feasible, but also risky. If they see Drogon, they'll cry treachery. Daenerys set the parchment down. I will think on this. One way or another, it seems the occupant of the throne has acknowledged my power. Whether to meet them or not might be the question that decides the fate of this war. Bendenmal. She dismissed her council, retreating to her private chambers. There, she studied a map of the approach to King's Landing, heart pounding with conflicting impulses. Offer peace or tighten the grip until the city yields without negotiation. The occupant's words, stilted and proud, lingered in her mind. She sensed a trap, yet also a genuine fear. Perhaps they truly did not want the city to burn. Perhaps they hoped for a last shred of victory in an otherwise inevitable defeat. She thought of the Iron Bank, the lords who had rallied to her, the small folk who hungered for relief. She would not risk her life needlessly. But if a meeting could avert a slaughter, was it not her duty to try? As she wrestled with these thoughts, Drogon roared outside the walls, and the ocean winds whistled through the castle's high windows. It felt as though the entire world held its breath, waiting for her choice. Night fell without a decision, and she paced her chambers until the moon rose. Memories of parleying with slavers and warlords in Essos flitted through her mind. She had faced treachery before and emerged stronger. Now, the stakes were higher, and the future of a continent hung on her every move. The occupant on the throne was cornered, and cornered beasts lashed out. But if she claimed to be a queen who valued the realm, she could not simply dismiss a chance at peace, no matter how unlikely its sincerity. In the darkness she finally stilled, gazing out the window at the starlit sea. She recalled how far she had come, from a frightened girl sold in marriage to a leader standing on the brink of uniting the Seven Kingdoms. Slowly, she set her resolve. She would hear the occupants' words, but on her own terms. She would craft her own conditions for the parley, ensuring a fair measure of safety. If the crown truly wished to talk, they would accept. And if they refused, it would prove they had no interest in peace. Daenerys turned from the window, lighting a single candle on her desk. She took a fresh parchment and dipped a quill in ink, composing her response. Her words were curt, yet polite, stating that she would agree to a meeting in a more neutral location, with limited escorts on both sides. She omitted any mention of dragons, leaving that possibility shrouded. Once she had written and sealed it, she pressed her signet ring into the wax. A sense of finality settled on her. She would face her enemy as a queen confident in her might, yet willing to spare the city a final cataclysm. If the occupant on the throne chose treachery, Daenerys would answer with dragonfire, and the realm would see that she had tried to avoid the conflagration. Gold had paved her ascent, diplomacy had cleared the path. Fire waited in the wings, ready to strike if her kindness was spurned. Rising, she left the letter for Missandei to deliver at first light. Then she returned to her bed, though she doubted sleep would come easily. As she lay listening to the waves batter Dragonstow's rocky shores, she felt the gravity of her impending meeting looming like a storm on the horizon. Every step of her plan had led here, to the edge of the capital, to a final gamble with a desperate throne. Whether it ended in negotiated surrender or a blaze of battle, she would see it through. When her eyes finally closed, she dreamt of a single candle burning in the center of a vast throne room. Its flame wavered, threatened by swirling shadows, yet it remained lit. And in that flickering light, she saw the reflections of her dragons, their silhouettes merging with the shapes of gold coins piled high, a testament to what she had built with coin and cunning, with the unwavering belief that she could create a realm redeemed from the ashes of old sins. And as she stood in that dream, the candle's flame leapt higher, illuminating the Iron Throne in a sudden blaze of hope.